On this first ever Nerd Talk, we have Brad Guigar, creator of Evil Inc. Be sure to jump down to the description where you can find a link to everything that we're going to be talking about, as well as you can sign up for the Nerdarchy newsletter where you can get gaming tips and learn how to game with Nerdarchy. I'm Nerdarchist Ryan, and today I'm joined by
Brad Guigar.
And this is our first Nerd Talk, and Brad Guigar is the creator, the evil genius behind Evil-Inc., as the website would indicate. So Brad, if you want to give us a short sort of bio about you.
Oh, certainly. My name is Brad Guigar. I've been living in Philadelphia since 1998. I came over here originally to work for the Philadelphia Daily News. And in 2000, having been spurned by the newspaper syndicates, I started an online comic at that point called Greystone Inn, which was a comic strip about a comic strip called also Greystone Inn. Very confusing. That turned into Evil Inc. in 2005.
So that was that's super meta for a start. So
yeah.
So Brad, other than puns, which you're pretty infamous for, what other things would you say that you're nerdy about? I guess comics probably fall into that too.
I would say, I'm nerdy about comics, but not reading comics. I'm nerdy about making comics, about deconstructing comics. Like I get really, really passionate about really stupid things like gutters and word balloon and lettering and coloring. That kind of stuff I can talk about for hours and bore people needlessly. But it's stuff that I really find incredibly, amazingly fascinating.
I also think you might get up to some Dungeons and Dragons with the kids, perhaps?
Yeah, we've started a D&D game. I played D&D very little when I was younger, back in the 80s when it was satanic.
Right. I mean, that's the best way to enjoy your D&D, with a little Satan.
Man, we were living on the edge. You should have seen us downstairs on Dad's pool table with the
hard
Doritos.
Drugs, the Mountain Dew and Doritos,
conjuring demons right behind the water heater. It was great. But now that I've got kids of my own, I wanted to kind of expose them to that. And I've got a friend that he's got kids around the same age and a couple other kids that were interested in it. And I was never smart enough to be a DM, but he was. And he said, okay, I'll DM the games. And he really got into it and bought all the books and all this kind of stuff. And we've got a regular game. We bring the kids. And really, it's more for the kids. And then the dads, the other DM has a very similar affinity for Scotch. And so he's always got a nice bottle off to the side. And everybody has fun.
Right. Trading out the Crown Royal bag for a nice Scotch.
That's right. A nice Lefroy gets us through the night.
Yeah, that's awesome. So who would you say some of your biggest creative influences would be?
Without a doubt, number one is Burke Breathed, who did Bloom County. Was a comic strip, dominated newspapers in the late 80s, and was really...
Maybe a little before my time, but...
A little bit. And unlike Bill Watterson, who everyone always points to, and obviously Calvin and Hobbes was great, unlike Bill Watterson, Burke Breathed stuff was very of its time. It was about what was happening currently. And so you've got to really have a firm background in the 1980s to understand what he's even talking about.
Right. So
the good news is that after, maybe 20 years, he's come back and he's doing independent comics. He's a web cartoonist now. Yeah. And he's putting his stuff out solely on Facebook. And he's up to his old strip again, as marvelous as he ever was. But really, that was my touchstone. And if you look at my early work, it was very much I was trying to be him.
So do you think that distinction of webcomic versus comic cartoonist is starting to blur away and go away nowadays?
Oh, yeah. It's over. It's over. Speaking as someone who spent hours futilely tapping away at his keyboard on those old, back in 2000, 2001, those print versus web flame wars that would happen on different message boards and stuff. And so far, I've used about 10 words that if you're under 30, you don't even know what I'm saying. But yeah, flame wars were a thing. Message boards were a thing.
Flame wars still happen. And I mean,
do they still call them flame wars?
Well, I don't know if they still. No, I think there's like flaming threads on even YouTube and this and that. Yeah.
But now everybody's on the web. There's no such, you couldn't even drum up a print versus web debate anymore unless you're, the one place you could do it maybe is at the annual gathering of the NCS, the National Cartoonist Society, where a lot of those old school syndicated cartoonists, are still
hang out.
Still
alive and well.
But even them, I think most of them are into it now.
Yeah.
At the time, the real funny thing is, at the time, we were the young bucks. We were riding in. We were turning everything upside down. They were like, "You're giving it all away for free," and we're like, "Nah, this is how we do it, Daddy-O, and screw you, and this is how we're." Yeah. And now, 15 years later, everything's changing again. And it's the guys like us that are scared. There's a lot of guys in webcomics right now that are very frightened.
So what's the thing that bothers you guys? Like, what's the thing you look at?
I'll tell you exactly what it is. It's ads. It's ad blockers, mainly. It's this idea of ad revenue disappearing, this thing that allowed us
to start
back
out
in the day to give free comics. They were never free. Yeah. We told them it was
Somebody
free.
else was paying for it.
But those ads were paying the bills. Yeah. That's the way it always has. And now we're looking at a whole new world, and we've become you're giving it away for free because we're all now the smart ones, I think, in my opinion, have moved to Patreon and Kickstarter, where you very much don't give it away for free necessarily. Patreon is basically a subscription program.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Kickstarter is a pre-order program. Yeah. They've dusted it off. They've given a new coat of paint.
They've modernized it for the modern era. I mean, it's the same. You know what? Everything that's old is new again. Because absolutely. Man, we could do the thing just about business, but so you look at the Box of the Month Club. Man, that was a thing with music way back when.
Right. So, yeah, you know what? I never thought about Kenner was doing that back before it was popular. It was. That's exactly the same thing. I never thought of it.
I mean, all the hipsters can be like, I was had a box. I had a CD of the Month Club before it was cool, before a Box of the Month.
Yeah. But the long and short of it is now everything has come around. It's come full circle, and now. The guys like me and the men and women that were doing webcomics back then are kind of considered the old guard now. And these kids that are on Tumblr and doing stuff that I cannot get my head around. They come up and they say, "I've got 100 This happened to be at a comic convention. Yeah. She raises her hand, real nice lady. And she says, she was in her 20s, right? A young woman. And she goes, I did this thing and I've got 100,000 reblogs. And she was very proud of herself. And I said,
what's a reblog?
Great. But I said, did that send traffic to your website? I saw the browse furrow and I'm like, the old geezer in me has to know. What is that 100,000 worth?
What's the return? Well, you know what, too?
Can you turn that into hey, buy my book? Can you turn that into read the archives?
A return viewer, if nothing else.
Right.
So that's the interesting thing with a lot of people that are doing things on the web is like that they don't sort of stamp their thing, watermark it. So like, hey, it'll come back to wherever I do my thing.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's huge.
Yeah. Sure. There's never been a better time to be a creative person on the web. This is
it's a renaissance. God. It totally is.
And we thought 2001 was a publishing renaissance. That's when people like me realized, hey, we can do this on our own. We don't need an editor. We don't need a publisher. We don't need a gatekeeper. We don't need somebody telling us we could do it. That's how we ended up with Kate Beaton. Right? That's who does Heart of Vagrant.
Yeah.
Listen, I'll show you. But, okay, Kate is a wonderful example because she did a comic that was super popular, is super popular. Yeah. It's all about history. No editor would have approved that in their mind. No publisher would have greenlit it. But she puts it out there, and there's a huge audience for it. Yeah. We would have never had a Kate Beaton without the publishing renaissance we had. Same thing for XKCD. Any number of comics you can point to.
We're in an era of like niche-ism, where like the niche, if it's big enough to support an audience, like maybe if you do something as obscure as like, I don't know, transgender furry related content, like maybe that's too small of the population. But anything else, like if you can get a big enough audience for it, then why not? Go for it.
That's just That's the renaissance we're in now. And that is, there's no such thing as too small an audience. What you worry about is having an audience that's not passionate enough. Because you can do amazing things with a small, passionate audience.
Well,
it's
the
not
only
about
thing
the
is,
page views
well,
on
I mean, the numbers, I'm just saying to like, if you're having to capture like 100% of a demographic, like that's impossible. You know, your numbers, I think, have to be realistic that you could maybe get like 3% of a group of people to be passionate and caring about what you're doing is kind of my thought on it. Yeah. So what was it that you would say would have been your biggest sort of kickstart to your career, actually, like getting out the gate?
The biggest kickstart to my career would have been probably that would have been 2000. I used to have all my convention badges up on the wall. And then it got depressing because it's like, oh my God, there's a lot of weekends.
You just think about all the money.
But probably the biggest kickstart to my career would have been in Baltimore around 2001, 2002. And that's when I met...
old ages past.
Yes. And that's when I met Scott Kurtz. And
who's that? I don't know who Scott Kurtz is.
PvP Online, one of the penultimate people in our craft. Nobody does it better than Scott, I don't think. I don't think anybody has humor as well as he does. And he certainly was somebody that I very much looked up to even then. And he came over to me, and I found not only did he introduce himself to me, but it turns out he was familiar with my strip, and it was very complimentary, and we still joke about this. He says, because he knew I was an old school comics fan, he says, I've got a VIP pass to the green room. John Romita's back there.
Nice,
Come on back, I'll introduce you. And I promised him I would, and I didn't, because I thought for sure he was fucking with me. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to go over there and I'm going to put him on the spot. He's going to be embarrassed because he was just trying to be nice. Come back later and he got really upset with me. He goes, where were you? We were going to meet. And I'm like, I didn't think you were serious. He goes, John Romita was right. I never have met John Romita at this point.
Now it's going to be a running gag where you have to avoid him to not make it come true.
But I went home from that kind of feeling like, I might be able to pull this thing off.
That's really cool.
That really charged me up for a long, long time.
Yeah, and I mean, you're funny as hell too. I mean, listening to you guys, there's this, the archive of the Webcomics Weekly podcast, and that thing, like I'd be in my studio listening to things, and I would just be laughing my ass off, like, do you guys just banter? I mean, there was some useful information about webcomics, but it was freaking hilarious.
We actually did an entire 60-minute show on rulers. If you go back far enough, and you can get all of this stuff.
I think I listened to all of them, but yeah.
If you haven't, go to webcomics.com. I've got all of the old Webcomics Weekly episodes up on webcomics.com. But the wonderful thing about that was that we were all we had been friends from doing comic conventions and running into each other, and we would have these wonderful after the convention just shooting the shit matches, right? Can I say that on your? Are you safe? I don't want to cause all kinds of bleeps.
This is not pure air. Yeah.
You can see some of the sketches. Like we would just sit around and start passing sketchbooks around, and just making each other laugh until we were hoarse. And then going up, and when the bar closed down, going up into one of whomever's got the closest room, and like kids at summer camp, giggling until 3 a.m. until finally we passed out from exhaustion. And that was the way the entire weekend went. And Webcomics Weekly all started from Scott Kurtz and Chris Straub getting the contract to do the How to Make Webcomics book and falling behind. And this actually happened. This wasn't Baltimore, but this was Bethesda. I remember it as if it was yesterday. We're in Bethesda, and Dave Kellett and I go up to Scott and Chris's hotel room. And Scott was phoned in. He wasn't in Bethesda, but he calls in on the phone.
So he's phoning it in. All right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's your headline. Scott Kurtz phones it in again. And they said, we got this book. And meanwhile, I had been writing something that I had titled the Webcomics Handbook. And I was doing this in my spare time, spinning my wheels on it a little bit, but I really knew what I wanted it to be, because a couple years earlier, I had gotten the contract to write the Everything Cartooning book for Adams Media. and they let me do a little chapter on webcomics, but I thought there was enough there that I could really make a book out of it. So I was trying to do that, and I was so pissed off that they were going to get this book out first. Yeah. And then they said, we're behind on this. We'd love if you guys would
your
come
tears
in.
are my joy.
Yes. Yeah. And so that we decided right there it was going to be a 12-issue book. We came up with, or 12-chapter book. We came up with all the topics. Everybody wrote 3 chapters. Everybody got first choice on a chapter they wanted to write. Everybody took a second choice, and everybody got saddled with a chapter they really didn't want to write.
This was like a draft pick.
Yeah. And we had that book out within like the next month and a half. We just banged it out. It was because we were all charged up.
Yeah, it was super enjoyable to read too.
Yeah,
so,
and we had so much fun doing that book that we decided, we're going to do this podcast to kind of promote the book.
It was a brilliant idea. I mean, as far as marketing and things like that, it was super clever. Yeah.
And then we realized that we really enjoyed talking to each other. We enjoyed being on the phone. We would look forward to this. And the first couple of times we tried to have a theme, like we had the ruler, show. But then pretty soon we just realized that we were in tune enough that we just turned the microphones on and started talking.
Just banter. And it's just solid gold from here and
it
out.
was a lot of those shows are among some of my favorite moments. And now Scott and I still do a podcast together, but it just became obvious that trying to get all 4 of us, as busy as we all are now, to intersect our orbits at the same time was just a losing battle.
Right. It's like that, what is it, this Stephen King movie, Stand By Me, or it's kind of like that where they all sort of fade away one by one. And it's the bios of what they did. That's funny. So now if you had a metaphysical question here, if you had a time machine, what advice or message would you give your early self? Like, what heaving mistake would you want to correct for yourself, or maybe a moment of desperation?
Wow, what mistake. Well, listen, I'm going to get metaphysical right back on you because I want my mistakes. I want every one of them because I learned from those mistakes. And it's something I really try hard to teach my kids. And that is failure is only failure if you refuse to or fail to learn from it. So I would be really scared of going back to past me and telling me to avoid mistakes because then I'm avoiding learning opportunities there. And every mistake, every boneheaded thing, every dumb, stupid thing I did led me to something good. Yeah. You know what I mean? In one way or another. Or it taught me a lesson that I never forgot again, right? Like the time, the best example is when I was pricing my books and put them out through Diamond. I just picked a number. I picked a price based on what Marvel and DC were pricing their books at.
And then not realizing my volume is not going to be what they're doing.
And my costs were way higher than theirs.
Yeah.
Diamond put their first order in for Evil Inc. Volume 1, and I went into the hole $200.
Oh, man, yeah.
So that taught me volumes about pricing a book and unit cost and all the stuff that I teach in my entrepreneurship class now.
Yeah, volumes about volumes. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So I would say if I were to take your question honestly and seriously, I guess what I would have to do is go back and really tell myself a little earlier that it was okay to start experimenting with not safe for work content. Because it took me a long time before I finally kind of got the picture through Patreon that that's what my readers were really going to support. Was they liked the network TV version of Evil Inc., but the HBO late night or even Cinemax,
yeah.
That version, they really support like crazy. And it took me a long time to get to the point where I was like, is this okay to do? Growing up in the Midwest, a Catholic no less, it took a long time for me to make peace with that decision. But it was the best thing I ever did.
I mean, so much of your stuff is kind of rides that cusp just a little bit. Oh. It's suggestive, but it's not certainly pornographic. But let's just make it certainly pornographic.
Yeah. We went, instead of go dancing around the line, we just left that line in the rear view mirror.
I mean, so much like superheroine costumes, there's barely anything there.
Well, it all started out, it was a practicality thing. In other words, the reason that superheroes wore those skin-tight costumes was because they were quicker to draw. Yeah. If you're basically you're drawing a naked body and you're putting cuffs on it, and now he's got clothes on. And if he were to wear, if the first superhero were Columbo, right, and had all the frumpy overcoat, drawing all those wrinkles and folds drives him crazy. So that's really, but that introduced really kind of a fetishism in the early comics, and Wonder Woman didn't help. No. Right, being a
little bondagey going on.
A little bondagey. Yeah. Go back and look at some of those covers. She was fighting torpedoes every 3 issues. She was up against some kind of torpedo being fired at her. Yeah. But yeah, there was a lot of kind of eroticism in comics, even back to the very early days. And so I really do think that's a little that's an inbred thread that you can't really deny it. And I think now there's room in comics for the entire spectrum. There's room for G-rated. I always get upset with people who give me the whole, I wish comics were fun
X or
again.
Y. Or,
yeah, I wish comics were fun again. Remember, I saw this guy a couple of weeks ago. He was to give me this whole thing. When we were kids, when it was Batman in the 60s, and that was fun, why can't comics be like that again? And I'm like, dude, you're just not looking hard enough.
Find that creator and support them that's doing that work.
Because there's a whole spectrum. Sure. Yeah. And if you want that, if you want the super friends, there's people doing that.
Back to Nietzscheism. It's just, maybe you have to look a little harder than your local comic book store or lobby them to get it on the shelf. Figure out how to make it happen.
And it might not be DC or Marvel. It might be an independent creator. Yeah. And it might not be the character you're used to. But that's good for you, too.
Look. Well, it's good for up-and-coming talent. But it's also, too, look at Scotty Young and the stuff that he's done for the young adult sort of niche.
Take a look at the whole, Franco, the Teen Titans comics. I'm blanking on it. Art. I'm blanking on his name. But those whole group of guys, they've formed a studio now. They do Tiny Titans and Spot Comics and all these guys. They're doing really, really cool comics for kids. You've got a whole bunch of creators that are doing amazing comics that are aimed just at young girls, right? Yeah. There's room in comics for everybody. And there's room for people on the other side of the spectrum that are doing stuff for grown-ups too, like me.
And the worst part of the equation too is you get the people, because it's the thing that happened with what's this stupid Gamergate scandal, right? Like the demographic that are like, if you make video games for someone else that's not us, then that clearly takes away from us getting the thing that we want. It's just like, no, everybody, we can be non-binary in everything, because I think America struggles with that in general. Like everything has to be A or B, where it's just like, no, there's a whole range of stuff, and everybody can have what they want. I mean, the internet makes this possible. That if I like a certain kind of thing, and Josie over here likes this other thing, she can get what she wants, and everybody's happy. Yeah. So, what do you got going on right about now?
Well, we're leaving very shortly for a trip to visit my family in Michigan. So now I am madly trying to get as much stuff, mainly for Patreon, because I've hit kind of a schedule with that. I'm trying to get as much Patreon content as I can in the bag, ready to go. And also try to get Evil Inc., the public-facing Evil Inc., done for the next couple of weeks. I'm wrapping up what is going to be the first major arc of the new Evil Inc. In 2016, I stopped doing a strip, and I started doing it more like a graphic novel. So it's actually written a bit using a sitcom template that I found. So I just translated minutes into pages, and it worked perfectly to give me a 22-page comic.
Timing, yeah.
So I'm now doing this will be the end of the first major 22-page arc, and now I've got to sit down with that template again and figure out where I want these guys to go for the next big arc.
Right, and so I guess you had a Kickstarter that had just wrapped up previously.
That's correct.
And you're in the midst of fulfilling that, so you're too late on that one.
But that'll be hitting the store. And Diamond will be featuring that one pretty soon. So if you didn't get in on the Kickstarter, there's still going to be ample opportunities to buy Volume 9.
Yeah, fantastic. So thank you so much for having me in your studio. And you guys leave comments if you want to see more Brad. I mean, maybe I can get him again, hopefully. He's in Philly, so we're local to one another.
Yeah, anytime you want to come out, just give me a holler.
Sounds fantastic. So thank you so much. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.